So now that we're on the second page, there's a few more rules, and we're going to end up adding them to the factor flow chart, but we're just going to look at them separately for now. And that is what we call the sum of two cubes and the difference of two cubes, okay? So cubes means that you're recognizing that you've got to the third power in your original problem instead of to the second power. So we already did one pattern. Now we're going to add two more, but they are both of them have got terms cubed in them, okay? So the pattern is that once you recognize what A and B are, you get A plus B, and then you get A squared minus A times B plus B squared, okay? So what that means is if you've got x cubed plus 8, okay, first thing you have to ask yourself is, okay, well, what is A and what is B, okay? So, let me move something real quick. There we go. All right, so that means that since this is cubed, A is the same thing as x. So I'm going to go off to the side, and I'm going to say, okay, that means that A is the same thing as x. So instead of saying A cubed, we're just saying x cubed. So those are the same thing because they're both cubed, okay? Now, it's different because you've got B cubed, but yet you have a number here. You've got the number 8. So you have to ask yourself, well, 8 is what cubed? Or you can cube root it. It just depends on how you want to see it. If you want to cube root it, or ask yourself, this is what to the third power. Okay, because you have to get it in terms of cubed, in terms of the third power, in order to find out what B actually is. So 8 is actually the number 2 cubed. Okay, 8 is the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2. So since I recognize that 8 is 2 to the third power, now that I've got the third power, now I know that B is the same thing as 2. Okay, and we're going to keep practicing it, but what you have to do is you have to get what the cube root is, or what the cube is, in order to plug it into the formula, okay? So if x is the same thing as A and 2 is the same thing as B, then that just means we put in x and 2 instead of A and B. So we put, instead of A, we put x, okay? Instead of A squared, we put x squared. And then I'll do that part in a second, okay? Now, instead of B, oh, let me get my blue. Instead of B, I put in a 2. All right. And then instead of B squared, I put in 2 squared. And we're going to write that as a 4 in a second. And then here, instead of A times B, A times B, well, A is the variable x, and B is the number 2. So really, that's just saying that's 2x. I just switch it around because that's just how we're used to writing it. And then the signs just go along with what the signs are here. So since this is plus, that the binomial part is a plus as well. Okay? If that's plus, then the leading one is plus. Then it goes minus and plus again. So it goes plus, minus, plus. This is always going to match the one that you started with, and then that means that the negative is going to go inside the trinomial, okay? It's really like the opposite of these. When you multiply those, you get a positive 2x, so you do the opposite in there, okay? All right, so then, let's look at it again. This is a very similar rule, except instead of plus adding your cubes, we're just subtracting our cubes in this case, okay? So here's the rule. If it's minus here, the binomial part we get is minus, and then those add. Okay, so there's only one negative in both of these patterns. In the first one, the negative is in the trinomial, right there. In the second one, the negative is in the binomial, because it matches the minus in the original problem, okay? So that means both of those are a plus. All right, so again, we need to figure out, well, A is what and B is what. Okay, so A Okay, now that we need to relate it to this. So we ask ourselves, what to the third power gives us 8? And then what to the third power gives us x to the third? Well, again, you can just cube root it if you want. The opposite of cubing is cube rooting. So if you want to cube root that, the cube root of 8 is a 2. And the cube root of x cubed is just x. So 2 to the third gives us 8, so that's why it's a 2. X to the third is just x. X is just replacing the a right there. So a is the term 2x, and we're going to plug that in, okay? Then we do the same thing for b. We say, okay, b is what to the third? Well, you could cube root that as well. Again, the opposite of cubing is cube rooting, so you're trying to get it out of that. So cube rooting would just be a 1. 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. So that one's easier than we thought, okay? So now that we know that a is 2x and b is 1, now we can put it into our formula, okay? Now the only thing I did forget to do is this 2 squared, we do finish writing that out as a 4. We actually do put just our final numbers in there. Okay, so now it's a minus b, so it's 2x minus 1. That's what we got in this first part. Okay, 2x, because that was a, and then 1, because that's b, and then subtraction, because the first binomial is always going to match the original problem. Then we say, okay, well, it's a squared. And be careful, when you say a squared, you want to say 2 squared and x squared. So what is 2 squared? 2 squared and x squared. You want to square both of them. So 2 squared is 4, and x squared is just x squared. Okay? The end is just b squared, so that would be a 1. So let's put in a 1 for this last. So that's 1, not s, but a 2. 1 squared is just the number 1. And then we multiply them and put them in the middle. So 2x times 1 is just 2x. So we'll say 2x times 1. Well, that just works out to 2x when I actually multiply them up. So that's 2x in the middle, and then they're both plus signs. So both of these patterns actually have only one negative. You just have to be careful where that negative is. When it's the subtraction, when it's the difference of cubes, the negative or the minus is in the beginning, the binomial, and when it's a sum of cubes, it's actually inside the trinomial, okay? All right, so we're going to take our time to practice that, but that's the setup where we have to find out what cubed, and then we just have to put it into our formula accurately, okay? So let's look at a couple more practice problems. Okay. All right. So it says factor it completely. So it even tells us we're going to be using the difference of two cubes formula. All right, and that's because this is a third power, and this can be cube rooted. It is something to the third power, okay? So the way we want to do that is we say, okay, well, z cubed is really just z cubed. So z is the same thing as a. So a is z. So wherever we see an a, we're going to put in a z, okay? Then 125 is what to the third power, because you need to get it in terms of the power of 3 in order to use our formula, in order to know what b is, okay? So what to the third power gives me 125, or you can cube root it. Cube rooting it, like if you put it in your calculator, that'll give you that's something to the third power. So the cube root of that is actually 5. So 5 to the third power is that 125. So whether you just find it by saying what to the third power, or whether you root it, the 5 is what we're going to use for our b. Okay? So now we just plug it into the formula. So looking back at your formula, since it's minus, there's minus there. So it's A minus B, and we said that B is the number 5. Okay? Then the trinomial says that it's A squared, so that is Z squared. It says that the end, the back part is B squared, so B squared is just 5 squared. We're going to write that number in a second. And then the middle part is A times B. So it's A times B, so that's Z times 5, or we would write it as 5Z. And then since the one subtraction in the problem is here at the beginning, that means I'm reminded that means that those are pluses there. Okay? So the only thing I would do, this is all worked out, except we can actually get 5 squared. So 5 squared is just the number 25. So you would work that out to get that last number, okay? All right, so then this says factor the polynomial completely. It actually gives us some ideas. This is where we're starting to layer. Factor the common monomial. So that's, by common monomial, we mean GCF. Okay, so factor out a GCF. So they both have a y and, let me see, they both divide by 3, it looks like. Okay, so, oh, it's right there, sorry. So they pulled out, the GCF is 3y. So let's divide both of these by 3y. And let's find out what we have left. So 81 divided by 3 is 27. Y to the 4th divided by y is y to the 3rd. 192 divided by 3 is 64. It's a plus in between, and then the y's cancel. Okay? So that is what we did before, was we did GCF. Now we have to take it to another layer. So like on your factor flow chart, GCF, what we have left is a binomial. There's 2 terms right there. So if you go to your binomial column or arrow, okay, we're going to add these 2 patterns in there. And so this falls under the sum of 2 cubes pattern. So now what we did for like this one, or the examples up above, we have to do it for this one. Okay? So we have to ask ourselves, let me move that little hand. There we go. All right, we have to ask ourselves, what is A and what is B? Okay? Well, remember, you can root it, you can cube root it in order to get it, because 27 is what to the 3rd power? Well, that is 3. 3 to the 3rd would give you 27, and then y, because you would, that is the same thing as like a cube. So you're cube rooting that and you get the y out, okay? So you do the same thing for 64. Cube root it and you actually get that it's a 4. Because this would be 3y to the 3rd, gives you this, and 4 to the 3rd would give you that, okay? So that helps us know just what a and b are in terms of that little 3rd power, okay? So now we just plug that into the formula. So this is what I'm saying. They're saying that this is 3y to the 3rd. So we change it so that we recognize that is A. This group, that monomial is A. And then this is 4 to the 3rd. So we have to put it in terms of that 3rd power. Then we can plug it into our formula, okay? So the formula is, since this is a plus, it's a plus here, which means that it's a minus and a plus there. Okay, the minus goes in the trinomial instead. All right, so then it's just a plus b. So I'll put it underneath. It's a plus b. And then this one is a squared, a times b, and then b squared. So once you recognize this is A and that's B, then you can just put them in. So A is the number 3y, or the term 3y, so I'll put that in front. B is the term 4, so I'll put that in back. A squared is 3 squared and y squared, so that's 9y squared, because you want to square both. A times b, multiply these two, and you get 12y. And then b squared is just squaring that 4, so you get 16. Okay? So we are going to practice it more, but that's the setup, that's the approach. You have to get it in terms of cubing, and then plug them into the formula very carefully, okay? All right, so let's see. Yeah, let's take a break, and we will do the last few together, okay?